So I often get asked the question, if I'm the one that calls 911 in the case of a domestic violence, can I still be arrested? And the short answer is yes. So what happens whenever law enforcement responds to the scene, whenever they're investigating domestic violence, they're going to look at the totality of the evidence. So they're going to look at a number of different factors, one of which is going to be who called 911, but there's also going to be the stories, whether or not there's any witness statements, whether or not there's injuries on either of the parties, and how this all matches up with the statements that are given. So if you did call 911, but all the evidence is lined up against you, you can still be arrested. In fact, I had a client just recently who came into my office, was very concerned, indicated that they were a victim of domestic violence. They called to report it and ended up getting arrested. Well, what ended up happening was law enforcement arrived at the scene. The other party actually had a scratch on them, while my client didn't have any injuries. So although my client was the one who was being attacked and ended up scratching the other party to defend themselves, law enforcement arrives, they only have the two statements, the other party had the injury, so they placed my client under arrest. So while calling 911 is certainly a factor that will come into play, for the law enforcement's investigation at the time, it's a small factor when compared with the totality of the evidence. Now, that's something that will come into play later on after the arrest, whenever prosecution is deciding whether or not to charge somebody with a crime. There's more opportunity to present the full story. And in my client's case, I was able to do just that, explain the full story that my client was actually defending themselves, that's where the injury came from, and evidenced by the fact that my client was the one that called law enforcement, the charge was eventually dismissed.
Carlson, Meisner, Hart, and Hazlett, protecting your rights since 1971.